Welcome, guys. This is Ask the Brook. This is our first Q&A session where we're going to talk about your questions. We're going to answer your questions. We've gotten a great response through Instagram over the past couple of days, and we're really excited to connect with you guys, to talk about our life, to talk about relationships, to talk about our careers, to talk about God and faith. And we're really excited that you guys made time to join us tonight. Jason, what else is going on at the Brook?
Well, we're in our house, so welcome to our house.
Welcome to our house.
I have my Uggs on. Tom Brady has Uggs, so don't make
Those
fun
are
of me.
Tom Brady Uggs.
So he's the GOAT, so I can have
Debatable.
Peyton Manning. What would you say?
We're Denver Broncos fans.
Yeah, John Elway, Peyton Manning.
Yes, there's a hierarchy.
Okay, we're so excited. We are in November 7th. We're having relationships talks coming at you from 7 to 9 p.m. It's going to be a live event. It is very limited with COVID-19. We can only have a few people, and so we're selling tickets. Almost 50% of our tickets are already sold out, so please sign up right now if you want tickets, but we'd love to have you there. Yeah, so I'm excited for tonight.
I'm excited for tonight.
Yeah, we got some good questions, so Tim, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
We've got some tough questions.
Oh, no.
Are you
I'm
guys
nervous.
ready?
So let's real quick, what kind of questions do we have? So if you want to stay on with us, we got dating.
So we're going to start with dating. We have a couple questions that are just general life questions that we'll talk about early on. Then we're going to get into career, like what is it like to navigate kind of a professional life. Then we're going to start talking about God, faith, some of the, I would say, more difficult questions.
Okay.
And then we're going to finish off actually with some questions on politics, which is very relevant to the time that we're at right now.
Gotcha.
Sound good?
Okay.
All right.
All right, guys.
We're excited to share. I mean, we don't know tons, but we've learned a lot. We've made actually all three of us have made a ton of mistakes in our lives. So we're excited to share our mistakes and some successes in life. So be fun.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
Let's jump into it. Okay, dating.
Yep.
You guys ready?
Here we go.
All right. So in the dating world, is it okay to be upfront with someone on where you're at in life and what you want early on in the relationship?
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay. I have to say yes and no, okay? So, it's not a cop-out answer. Hear me out. So, I think it's so good, especially the older you get, the more you know yourself, the more you know what you want in life, the sort of person that you're looking for. So, I think it's good to be upfront on the front end with kind of, your vision for your life, your values. But I've also seen this happen, guys. I've seen girls and guys who kind of get set in your ways a little bit. And you just kind of have this really particular sort of life that you're looking for. And it can be hard to fit somebody into that. And so I think God calls us just to kind of be open-handed a little bit as well with all of our plans and all these details in our life. And so I have to say yes and no.
Jason?
Yeah, I would say similar as Molly. I think that you need to be upfront with where you're headed in life. I mean, I think you got to ask the question, why are you dating?
Yeah.
So that it really goes all down to that, is why do people actually date? Is dating just to have fun? Is it to get a free drink? Is it to get a free meal? What is it for you? Is it just to go have fun? Or is it you're actually trying to pursue a deeper relationship that ultimately will lead to marriage? So if that's where you're trying to go, I think you want to be upfront with who you are, especially with your faith and where your background is on that, because you don't want that to limit. If you're going, I want a long-term relationship, or I'm dating so that hopefully I can meet my spouse. And then I've seen people make mistakes, Tim, I feel like, where they try to say what people want to hear. So on their dating profiles and such, they always put their best picture. They always say the things that they think people want to hear. And a lot of times that doesn't give you actually who you are. And so you really go on these dates, and you've probably been on a few, Tim, where you go on a date and you meet someone and you're like, oh, you're completely different than what I thought you were.
Yep.
And it's because they weren't upfront with who they really are. So I think you got to ask, why are you dating? And then I think it is good to be upfront what you want about life. And I agree, Molly. I think a lot of people, especially the older you get, as you get late 20s, 30s, 40s, and you're single, you get kind of your routine, what you want in life and your vision for your life, which is really good. But if you're wanting that marriage relationship, really marriage is about sacrifice and releasing. It's not about your dream anymore.
Yeah.
It's about your together dream. And so there's some dreams that died when I married Molly. And that's great. I'm glad they died. I will never sail the world. That was a dream of mine, to sail the
I
world.
get seasick really easily.
We went sailing while we were dating in Cabo in this we weren't even in the waves yet, Tim. And I look over and Molly's just blowing chunks out the side, and I go, if I want to marry this woman, I will never be a sailor.
That's
so
right.
I actually kind of wanted to sail, not around the world, but just go sailing.
Yeah.
That dream died. So yeah,
True.
what would you say?
Well, I think you guys are absolutely right, and I think that we really have to think about too, like, how do we define a relationship? And it segues actually really well to our next question, which is if somebody was in a relationship and we're talking about God, we're talking about faith, right? And if their faith isn't aligned, or if they don't have the same beliefs, does that mean that they're being set up for potentially an unhealthy relationship down the road or an unhealthy marriage?
I mean, I think with any relationship, the biggest thing is communication. So if you're in a relationship and you start finding out, we have very different, ways of viewing God or of life, and that comes to surface, I think it's something you definitely need to talk about. And, you need to kind of play out, okay, that decision of if we stay down this path and we kind of don't come to agreements with where we land on, some of the big questions of life, how is that going to impact our marriage? How is that going to impact maybe our kids? And so I would say if you're in that spot right now, and I know a lot of people are, that these things come up during dating, and that's a good thing. Just to not shy away from those topics, not to just kind of put them on the back burner and say, just someday it'll work itself out. Talk about them right now. They're serious issues, just things that could potentially be divisive later. And I'm not saying for sure, but they're just things that, let's just communicate about this right now and let's take this seriously, because we'd rather do it right now than just kind of shove it away and see what happens.
Yeah, so it's like you're saying that when you're going on a date with somebody, you're not dating a future version of that person.
No.
You're dating who they are today. You're dating what is true today.
Yep.
And so it's important to, I think, objectively look at the relationship in that way.
Totally, because I think it's easy to enter marriage thinking, this is who they're going to become. You kind of marry who
Molly
you
had a
think they're
lot
gonna
with that
become.
with me, and she's realized I don't change.
No.
13 years.
No, but I think when you say yes to marriage, you have to say yes to what's true, what is currently true, and if it meets all the boxes and it's okay, then you say yes to it. But you can't say yes to what you want to be true in the future or you think could be true in the future. I think that could lead to a lot of hardship in marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's priority level, like how important is your relationship with God? And so hypothetically say Molly and I were dating, and Molly, like, God, Jesus is not important to her at all, and it's highly important to me, and it's like the most important thing in my life. And so if something's the most important thing in my life, if God is the most important thing in my life, what will I naturally do about the most important thing in my life? I'll talk about the most important thing in my life. That most important thing in my life will dictate how I live. It will dictate how I act, how I treat others, what kind of job path I have, even my finances. It's gonna influence and impact every single one of those. Yeah. Now, all of a sudden, when I bring someone else in there, there's this kind of dilemma that's happening. Like, this is most important thing in my life, and it just, how do you view that?
Yeah.
If you view that like, why is that the most important thing in your life? Why would you ever give that time? That's going to create some divide because there can't be synergy. So when you talk about, is that going to lead you to unhealth? It just depends. And it depends how the other person responds to that. But for me, I think if you want God to be the most important thing in your life, you want someone that can do that alongside of you, because it affects every part of you. Especially if you're dating right now, you're not locked in. Totally. You're not locked in forever. But I believe when you get married, there's extenuating circumstances. But when Molly and I made a commitment to get married, we're in it. We're doing this. We're going to do this forever until death do us part.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to go a whole life when you don't have that kind of synergy in your relationship with God and each other. And I think also, I'm not the most important thing in your life, and you're not the most important thing in my life currently. Jesus is.
Yeah.
And so that makes it really easy because we can look at each other as humans and be okay with each other's flaws and find satisfaction in Jesus and Him alone.
Yeah.
I think it's really good, and I think something that stands out of what you guys are saying too is that there's a difference between dating and marriage, because God is a God of grace, He is a God of love, and He wants His kids to have thriving, successful, joyful marriages. He wants that for your dating life too. The difference is that when you're in a dating situation, it's okay to have those high standards. It's okay to really think about, okay, who is the type of person that I want in a partner that I'm going to potentially spend the rest of my life with. And for many of us, especially young people who are in a season of dating, maybe the most impactful thing that a person could do is actually say no. And it's very difficult to do, but that could be the catalyst to starting an entire new season of dating and relationships. So
I'll talk more about it when we do our relationship talks, but that was my life. Like, I was in a long-term relationship and I broke it off and said no to it because I felt like it wasn't pushing me in my relationship with God at that time. And I'm so glad looking back now, because I would have never met Molly. I would have never found her. I would have not been single. And so that no actually turned into a better yes.
It's so good. And I think that for any of you guys listening who you're more curious about relationships, dating, all these things that we're talking about, this is just a preview, I think, of what we're going to cover in much more depth on November 7th, the Relationship Talk. So please check it out.
And if you can't make it, if you're one of our many people that are around the world that are a part of the Brook, we'll be putting it on YouTube and you can experience it after the conference as well.
Okay, we're going to transition a little bit. This is a funny question. This was one that came up. Somebody asked about you, Molly, specifically. In the last video, asked Jason and Molly, where did Molly get the cute pink purple sweater? Molly, enlighten us.
I love that sweater. Okay, so it just got cold enough to wear it. I actually bought it this summer. I know, I bought a sweater in the middle of summer. But Anthropologie had a sale this summer. So it's from Anthropologie. And I was ecstatic to wear it because it was finally cold enough to wear it. So go get you one. Anthropologie.
Man, wow. That's she gets those kind of questions, huh?
It's the softball. It's a softball, right? Okay, so let's transition to career. Career is obviously a big part of our lives. We spend a lot of time in our careers. So there's a lot of young people who are making the transition away from college and into a full-time job position, a more professional environment. What advice do you guys have for people who are seeking a mentor or seeking to follow in the footsteps of someone who might be a few years ahead of them?
I think it's so good. I think in college especially, we insulate ourselves so we're all around the same type of people. And we think that there's a big variety of people, especially if you're like in Greek life when you have like the seniors that are dealing with the pledges and it's like this big divide. But honestly, it's 4 years. You don't learn that much as a human in 4 years. You don't mature that much as you're kind of similar people. And so we spend these 4 years a lot of times, if you go to college, around all the same type of people. And Molly and I used to work on a college campus and we had kids. And I remember when we take kids on campus, it was like a extinct animal walked on campus. They're like, I haven't seen one of those in a long time. It's because like you're in this your own little paradigm that you hold on to. And so it is so good. And I see this as a huge mistake by most people that graduate college is they kind of keep that same friend group of only like 23 to 27 year olds. And it's like, I keep my small little like group from college and then we keep going. But the bad thing is you don't get a perspective and vantage point from the world. And I believe in our careers, the best thing in my career has been older mentors. I mean, I have a guy that's 57. I have a guy that's 58 that mentor me, and they give me so much wisdom and perspective. And so it's really kind of how do you get that is one, being humble, being willing to say, I don't know it all. I think when you walk into your first job, you feel like you have to be like, I got this. No one likes that guy. Does anyone like that guy?
Absolutely not.
What kind of guy do you like when they walk into your engineering firm, first day on the job? What kind of person do you like?
Somebody who can exhibit personal and professional humility.
Yep.
I think the most valuable quality in a leader of any capacity is servant leadership. What that actually means is it's humbling yourself to the point where you can say, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. But what you'll actually find out is that type of persona is respected, it's admired, and it's also, I think, the predecessor to what it takes to actually figure out the answers that you do need to know to be successful in your career.
Totally. definitely.
Yeah.
And I think it's neat. Even in the Bible, in Titus, it says the older women are to teach the younger women, and the older men are to teach the younger men. And this doesn't mean you have to be, 20, 30 years older to teach somebody younger. Even just a pub for the Brook. I love within the Brook, we have people from 18 years old to like their late 30s. And within each, the 20s and 30s, so much change happens, even within those different phases of life, that whoever asked this question, I applaud you, because I think a lot of people don't think about being intentional when it comes to seeking out people to mentor them. They get busy with life, and that kind of gets put on the back burner. The people who I've seen really succeed have sought out and been intentional with getting mentors into their life and not being too busy for it. So
as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another, right?
Yeah, it's so true. You know, on our own, we just kind of try to do the best we can, but why not glean like knowledge or wisdom from someone who's already been through it? Like, we can get a little bit farther even.
Yeah.
And I think a number one thing of looking for mentors, especially in your career, a lot of times we can look at like the dollar signs, who makes the most money, who looks the most successful, and go, oh, I want to be like them. But I don't know about you guys, but I've met people like that I'm like, wow, I want to meet them. Look how much money they have. Like, I want to learn from them. And then you look at their character and you look at the sacrifices that they're doing in their family life and other areas, and you're like, I actually don't know if I want to be like them. So I think when it comes to mentorship, you can kind of pick and choose some places you can learn. You can learn business from certain people, but you might not want to have the life that they have.
Yeah.
You might not want to be the type of person they want to be. So I'm also looking for people that share that similar faith side of things as well. Is there someone that's following after Jesus that's a few years ahead of you that you can go, how do you do these things together? How do you follow after God, and how do you actually be successful in this career?
And I think what I hear from that too is the value of investing in people.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's something that we do ourselves. We invest in other people, like the next person up, but also we get invested in by mentors, and that's such an important piece of any type of leadership role.
Yeah.
One of the things that probably the best thing I've ever done with mentors, because I've gone after some mentors that are like hard to get a hold of, that people are like, okay, you got one shot with them. I always bring a notebook, I bring a pen, I have like 10 to 15 questions that I've already kind of thought through that I'm ready for, and I ask them questions, and then I just start writing and listening. And then good mentors typically challenge you to do something.
Yeah.
And it's actually, I'll tell you the secret, it's a test to see if you'll be faithful to actually do it.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I write down that action point. They're like, you should read this book. You know what I do? I buy that book on my way out of that coffee. I read it in 2 days, and I text them and say, hey, when can we meet again? I just got done reading this book and would love to follow up with you.
Great advice.
It shows them that you actually want to learn, not that you're just trying to suck up to them.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So there was one final question on the career side that was talking about making a career change, which I can think back on my career, and I think some of the more stressful times in my life was actually when I was making a big leap in a career change. And especially when you're thinking about like, what are your gifts, what are your talents, what is the direction that you might feel God is leading you towards. And I think that having gone through this a couple of times, one of the best pieces of advice that I could give to anybody is God can steer the bus, but he can't steer a bus that isn't moving. And so many times, some of the best changes, and I think the ways that God can actually intersect our lives, is through us taking small faith steps. And what that could look like is it's sometimes not as significant as we think it might be. Don't be ashamed of small beginnings, because I think that the small beginnings are the first fruits, and they're the seeds that precede some of the more substantial and significant career changes that we actually see. Do you guys have any thoughts on what should a person do who's contemplating a career change?
Yeah, I think that's so good, and I think God uses like our past and the things that we've learned to build upon. So I think it is challenging sometimes when you feel like there is a sense of change coming, because you think, oh wait, all this other stuff I've learned, is that a waste? God never wastes a thing. He uses everything from your past, whether it be career, whether it be sports, whether it be anything that to build upon. He is building his person, and he is using your life experiences to do that. So don't be fearful if you feel like God's calling you to that. He's not gonna waste anything.
I mean, I think of that for you, like Molly if you follow us on Instagram, like you see Molly do a lot of public speaking, and really the Brook is the first time you've ever done that as public speaking, and you're really, really good at it. And we had a professional speaking coach that saw Molly and like heard her, and he was like, how is she that good if she's never professionally spoke? And I was like, well, she did like musical theater growing up. And like, it was interesting that God even used that portion of her life to prepare her for this life, this part of her life. And so you never know what God's preparing for you to do. He says he prepares in advance good works for you to do. And so he's preparing the way, he's laying out good works that you can be a part of. I also think, Tim, one of the things that people don't realize is that we mold and we change in life, and our character changes, who we are, we change. And so maybe what we thought we were good at when we were 18 or 25 or 35, we're no longer like that anymore. We mold and we change. I had a mentor actually tell me every 7 years you actually go through a changing position in your life where you grow in something, and then you kind of hit your peak and you start dipping. You're like, I'm kind of bored right now. And he goes, what you want to do in every part is at that peak, it's about year 5 or 6, start thinking, what's the next thing to take all of this and add on to it. Wow. And so as I thought through that, I'm like, I've kind of felt that in my own life. Every 7 years, I feel like 7 or 8 years, even in our marriage, my job, my relationships, you kind of feel like it's getting stale. It's not that those things are bad. It's just we want to keep going to the next level.
Totally. Love it.
All right, so I want to shift gears a bit and go from career relationships to actually talking about God. And at the Brook, we believe that life is about having good relationships, that we can investigate how God will actually intersect our lives to lead us to a great life and great relationships. And so let's talk about God for a second.
Yeah.
Cool. So there's a question on here that's, I think actually, in my experience, is probably one of the more challenging questions that gets asked. It's also probably one of the I think biggest dilemmas that a lot of believers have in God. And so the question that was posed was, why does a good God allow pain and suffering in the world?
Hey, our DoorDash is here. I gotta pick that up. I'm sorry.
You can go grab it.
Gotta get the food.
I'll start with the question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is a really hard question. Because, I think of my life, I think of my friends. You see all the hurt and pain around us, and it grieves us, right? Yeah. That looks good. But I think back to, so in the Bible, in Genesis, God created the world, and he created this perfect place, like the Garden of Eden. It was this perfect place. My daughter's name is Eden, actually. And it means place of beauty. And it was just this amazing spot, and God was there. But he created Adam and Eve, and he gave them freedom of choice. And when they sinned, sin entered the world, and so it tainted everything that was perfect and beautiful. And since then, as we look around in our world, there's like disease, there's disaster, there's all these things that happen because when sin entered the world, hardship basically entered the world. And so, it stinks that's what I remember being a young girl and being so frustrated with Eve because she sinned. I was like, if you wouldn't have sinned, we wouldn't have had all this in the world. But God wanted to give us freedom of choice so that we could choose a relationship with him. We could choose, a relationship of love isn't true love unless you have the choice. If I was just in a what's the word I'm looking for? Like arranged marriage. If I was in an arranged marriage, that wouldn't be a choice of love. But God gave us he didn't put us in an arranged marriage where we just automatically have to follow him. He said, I'm going to give Adam and Eve freedom of choice.
Yeah, Siri doesn't have a choice to listen to me or love me or not. Yeah. She just does what I say.
Exactly. There's no relationship
it's no relationship.
Yeah, and so with that sin, it changed the world.
Absolutely. That's a great answer. And I think that one of the things that we have to think about when we're contemplating that question too is the existence of evil also points to the existence of a creator. So what that means is that if there is a moral law, then there must be a moral law maker. Mm-hmm. And so that's just an interesting question to think about. I think also too is there are limits that we have as humans that we have to acknowledge. And it's a hard thing to contemplate, because oftentimes we look at things objectively and we say to ourselves, this seems wrong or this seems evil. And in the Bible, it talks about how God's ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. I remember when I was in 3rd grade, my family moved to Texas. And I grew up in Colorado, and I was really sad about it. I had to move to a new school. I had to make new friends. And as a child, I thought what was happening was so wrong. And I was upset, and it bothered me, and I was upset with my parents. And as I look back on that situation almost 25 years later, I think to myself how, well, my parents actually had a greater plan in place that I didn't see.
Yeah.
You know, they were providing for me. They were providing a house for me, food, things like that. And so I think sometimes it's important to consider, too, the limits that we have as people and understanding the actual reality of suffering and evil.
Yeah.
And put our faith and hope that God does have a greater plan.
Well, and I think God, all the hurt and hardship in the world, it also grieves God. It's like he hates that, you know. But the thing that we cling to as believers is that, okay, we don't expect that the world is just going to be perfect. In heaven, everything will be perfect. But while we're here on earth, the thing that God promises is that we will have his peace and his presence, okay? So his peace and his presence through hardship, even though we will go through hard things here on earth, he promises that we will have his peace and his presence. And so that's what we cling to until we get to heaven someday, where it will all be made perfect and new.
And I mean, there are so many horrific events that happen every single day. And it's super sad. Yeah. And I think of all the horrible events that have happened in my life, friend's life, to watch death, to watch disease. My brother has a lot of mental problems and seizures, and just watching that growing up I've always asked the question, like, why'd you do that, God? And I think sometimes we ask the wrong question instead of like, why do bad things happen to like good people? Like, I'm a decent human being. I'm not Hitler. We always compare ourselves to like the worst people. We're like, I'm not that guy. I'm not Hitler. I'm not this person. But we are sinful.
Yeah.
Like, it says in the Bible that everyone has sinned. Everyone has fallen short of God and his perfection and his glory. So when we compare ourselves to a perfect God, like Molly said, we are nothing. We don't deserve anything. We actually deserve to be separated from him forever because of our sin. Yeah. Yet in his goodness, the question that we should be asking is, why would a good God give us just such a good gift of grace and love through Jesus? And why would a good God send a perfect human being, Jesus, to die on a cross? You talk about a horrific event. It's when Jesus bled out on a cross, murdered and crucified. And this perfect person that had never sinned actually died for us. And so good triumphed evil on that day. And someday we can hope, and this is why I believe in Jesus, I hope for. It says that in heaven, that every tear will be wiped away. And all the horrific things and all the pain and all the suffering. Yeah. That's why we hope in something. That's why Jesus is so amazing, that we get to hope in that and have eternity with him, and that we don't live for this world or this kingdom or this political cycle. We live for eternity.
Yeah. Wow. And I think that's the power of perspective. If you were to look at holiness as a spectrum or as a scale, and if we were as people all the way over here and God was all the way over here, if you took the most evil person that you could think of who's ever lived on planet Earth, and then you took the holiest person, like Mother Teresa, they would both be sitting right over here. And God is all the way over here on the other side of the spectrum. And so I think it's important to remember that too, is that the holiness of God is something that it's honestly hard for us to wrap our minds around.
Yeah.
So to wrap that topic up, what advice would you guys have for somebody who might be listening to this, who's new in their faith, who's trying to question, figure out what this whole Jesus thing is about? What advice do you have for them?
I think it's good to ask those questions and also not be afraid to talk to God about those questions and those hardships that you're feeling and wrestling with. I think one of the best things you can do is be honest with God. There's no prayer, there's nothing that's too hard for him to hear or to handle. So I think being honest with God about that, and then trying to find just a community of people that can support you as you start your new journey of following God. Just finding a community that can encourage you, that can kind of help you along in that.
Yeah, we'd love to be that for you guys. We love getting in conversations about it, and I think that is good. I think so many people are turned off by faith because they think it's a blind faith. It's like, just do it, don't, and it'll make you feel good. We don't believe that.
Yeah.
We believe in looking into God. We believe in looking into the Bible. We believe that there's actually proof. And then when you experience it, it is so amazing. And so if you're struggling even in your faith, keep searching, keep going, and keep talking to people. We'd love to talk to you.
Yeah. All right, we're going to shift over to a completely different topic. It's really relevant right now. Politics. Yeah, you didn't expect that, did you?
Well, I did because you told us at the front end.
Well,
Yes.
so I think that we can all objectively look at, we got the election coming up in a couple of weeks. I think what we see in America today is that politics is probably one of the most polarizing topics where it really divides people. And people are afraid to express their beliefs. They're very vocal about their beliefs sometimes. And it seems like as a country we're getting further and further on the spectrum apart from each other.
It's a tough scene we're in.
Without-
So I had a thought though as you were talking. I know you're going to ask a question, but I want to push something back at you because you told me something really interesting. You told me about Abraham Lincoln when he ran against, who was it?
George McClellan.
George McClellan. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think the election was 1864, and Lincoln was running against this other guy, and the stat at the time was that if Abraham Lincoln and the guy running against him were to walk down Main Street in Washington, or they were to walk down Broadway in New York City, they would be recognized by less than 10% of the population. And so what that meant is that during that period of time, the way that people were elected was they would publish ideas, they would publish debate transcripts in newspapers and journals, in periodicals, and then people would read their ideas and they would say, okay, I agree with this guy on point A, B, and C, and I disagree with him on point C, D, and E, and then they would make a vote. Whereas you look at today how we make our decision and our discernment to vote, and a lot of times it's more based off of images, it's based off of videos, and I think even with the social media world that we're so immersed in today, it's really interesting to see how a lot of times we get fed what we want to see.
Yeah.
The way the algorithm works is
Like
that if
Social Dilemma, Netflix, watch it.
absolutely you're going to get fed. I mean, whatever it is you believe, you will get more exposed to that, which I think is what continues to push people apart. So
Yeah, you saw on that documentary, it showed like growth of Facebook and the political divide and how we almost just totally are divided more than ever. So interesting.
absolutely. So then bringing that back
Yeah.
as Christians, or as people investigating their faith, or as just people who want something better, how do we navigate this world of politics, and how do we talk politics in this really divisive world that we live in?
I mean, to be honest, I've kind of shied away at times because it's just so divisive. But then what I've noticed is if I actually talk with people, it's a little bit different. So I have friends that are in all different places in their political views. And that's really good for me to have. It kind of goes back to that college mentality I was talking about before, is we can get so sucked into our like little viewpoint and who we are that we don't know anyone different than us. And it is so good to have conversations with people in all different viewpoints. So I think as followers of Jesus, we can't dehumanize people. A lot of times, especially over Facebook, I'm guilty of going on like people that have either an extreme view either way and just reading the comment sections just for fun. And you're like, oh my gosh, just the amount of like arguing that is happening versus maybe like what would you do in a real life conversation? We were talking about this. I think you're like, how would you talk to somebody if they were like this on a couch next to you?
Yeah.
And actually, how would you look them in the eye and how would you interact with them? That should be how we talk on Facebook. That's how we should talk on any sort of social media. We should be able to engage in that way. And I think ultimately too, whoever wins, like we should vote, we should care, but we live for a different kingdom. Like I was saying before, is we live for the kingdom of God, which is eternal forever. And that's going to be the most important, because, people say this is the most important election in the history. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Like it's always the most important election ever. And so we can't get ourselves too worked up also that this is going to like make or break the world. Like that's not who's in control of the world.
Yeah.
Politicians don't rule the world. God is the ultimate authority.
And I think so much of our faith too is this balance between truth and grace. I've heard it said before that truth without grace is mean, but grace without truth is meaningless. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important to strike that balance too, as we're even thinking about our own beliefs and thinking about how do we form an actual opinion around some of the issues and get involved. The other thing that I think is really important too is just as Christians, we should be the people who are the leaders in going first, in reconciling relationships, in having conversations, just like you said, at a coffee shop or at a restaurant, and sitting down with people and actually hearing what they have to say. I think that's a really important step, but it's kind of interesting. At the Brook, we talk with a lot of people who are all different places in their faith.
Yeah.
And I think you guys tell me if you feel this is true, but I think in my experience, if I could pull out the common denominator of what it is that maybe deters people from faith in God, it's not actually disbelief in God.
No.
More often than not, it's a bad experience with somebody who said that they were a Christian.
Totally.
And so I think that what that tells me too is that it's even more of a responsibility for us to carry ourselves in a way that is representative of who Jesus was, to be a light to people.
Yeah.
And we can hold ourselves with dignity, humility, not prideful, not boastful, as followers of Jesus. I have some really good friends that are married, that I respect their marriage. I love them a ton. And they, last election, voted for different parties and different people. And it's okay. And they were like, they're still married. They still love each other. And so I think there's this like balance also of just realizing our call is also to love, and we want to have truth, but we also want to have grace. I think that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah. So as we're wrapping up here too, I'll close this out here just with a verse that I think is helpful to keep in mind. But the Bible says to do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but rather in humility value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. Yeah. And so what does our life look like when we really think about the interests of others and we put them above our own? Totally. So guys, this was awesome. Yeah. We covered a lot of topics. As we leave, is there anything that you guys want to close out with? Future plans for the Brook, things that are coming up?
I think I just want to say that I love this space where we can kind of talk about just faith and relationships and just hard questions that come up around those things, and just be real about our struggles, about the things that we've grown in. And we want you to come on this journey with us. As you guys have questions, we'll do more of these get-togethers, but just to create a space that we can talk about real things.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
It's just been really cool. We're super thankful for, as we've been able to do some live events and we do Zoom calls and different things, getting to meet different people, hear people's different stories. And what's really cool is we're seeing just pockets of like really cool connection and community happening. I know we got a crew out in San Francisco. We got a huge crew in like Denver, and then even sub crews of that in Wash Park to like out by Tennyson. We just have these groups of people, and really that's kind of our hope, even our prayer, because we think that we're better as a community investigating how to have a great life, how to have great relationships, and to know God, and we can do that together. So if you're not a part of what we're doing, we would love for you to join in. You could, you're following us on social, but join in with one of our groups or get plugged in. Go to the Get Involved button on our website, and we'd love to tell you more.
Thank you guys for joining us. This was a lot of fun. We look forward to talking about this again soon.